critically important conversation to be having at this moment in history on Inauguration Day, no less. My name is Anne DePrince. I direct DU's Center for Community Engagement to Advance Scholarship and Learning, or CECL, as we fondly call it. I am also the co-leader of the Collaboration for the Public Good Working Group with my colleague, Cara Dieno. The working group is the strategic leadership team for implementing DU Grand Challenges. Please note your colleagues here who are involved in that strategic planning team. We would welcome to hear questions or comments from you about the initiative. DU Grand Challenges, if you're wondering what on earth is that, it is a family of programs, a university-wide initiative that brings community and university changemakers together to take collaborative action to address the public issues of our time. This event, the forum, is a way that we try to engage constituents from campus, the larger community, alums, in aspiring for actions that we can take together for the public good. Throughout the time together today, if you're inspired to share things that you're thinking about, please feel free to do so on social media. And while you're figuring out what to tweet or otherwise share, let me tell you a little bit about what to expect. We have 4 brief lightning talks today. These are illuminating, impactful talks designed to get us all thinking and ready to engage and dialogue together from our diverse perspectives. After we hear and are inspired by the lightning talks, we'll have time for just a couple of questions. So please use the Q&A function if you'd like to ask our amazing speakers some questions today. Once we have a little bit of discussion as a big group, our real goal is to get you talking with one another. So we're going to transition to breakout rooms, just as we would in person, mix and mingle around the room. Each breakout room will have a facilitator. They're there just to help get the conversation going, but it's our hope that you'll be able to really dig into a discussion based on the lightning talks and how you're thinking about centering anti-racism in university community collaboration. Now, before we, and don't worry, you'll be able to turn your videos on and actually speak to and see each other when we get to the breakout rooms. Before we jump into the formal program, I want to make a couple of quick acknowledgements. First, I want to acknowledge our fabulous co-sponsors for this event, including iRise, as well as the Faculty of Color Association. We will get to hear from Professor April Alexander later on a bit about the Faculty of Color Association. And on behalf of iRise, I wanted to share a quick flyer that we'll also push out through social media about an upcoming event that may be of interest. We also, in terms of acknowledgements, want to acknowledge the work of staff across campus who are making this forum possible, from our colleagues in IT who are letting us connect virtually while we cannot necessarily connect in person. We want to also acknowledge and thank custodial and facility staff who are working to ensure that we're all as safe as can be when we are on campus. And of course, it's also important to acknowledge that though we're not together in person today, we are connected by the university and the land that it sits upon. The Cheyenne and the Arapaho are the original stewards of that land, and we wish to acknowledge their sacrifices, their hardships, as well as other indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home. Of course, change requires radical acknowledgement of our history, of our present moment, but acknowledgement is not enough. We must find a way to use that radical acknowledgement in the service of working together for change. And that's what these forums are about, especially with today's featured speakers. It is my distinct honor to introduce our speakers today, who will inspire us to imagine what might be possible when we center anti-racism in community university collaborations. We will hear first today from data activist and systems manager from Frontline Farming, Kasey Neiss. They will be followed by Gabrielle Hyde, a fourth-year student studying anthropology. And then we will hear from Zoi Johns, a third-year student also studying anthropology with a side of international relations. And then finally, Professor Alejandro Cerón from the anthropology department will wrap up with the last bolt of lightning for our talks today. The speakers will go one after another. We'll be recording their remarks today, and we're just so grateful for your time and perspective. Kasey, would you take it away for us?
Thanks, Anne. I'm going to share my screen for a couple quick slides. I wanted to first start off, again, my name is Kasey. I am the data activist and system manager for Frontline Farming. I'm also a DU alum. I graduated from the Masters of Anthropology program in 2019 from DU. And so that's how I'm actually connected to the school. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. So first, Frontline Farming. We are a Black, Indigenous, and people of color and women-led organization in Denver, and we work towards food sovereignty and farmer liberation. So we are a farming organization at heart. We cultivate a total of 5 acres over 3 plots in Jefferson County, Denver County, and Adams County. And this is a nice photo of our farming crew this past summer. I also wanted to share real quickly about our framework. So we use this 3-prong or 3-pillared framework of food security, food justice, and food sovereignty. A lot of the food system was built on the back of racism and underpinned by racism. And so we use this framework to talk about sovereignty not as an end goal, but as a constant process, and how we are often overlapping all the time in security and justice and sovereignty. So security is typically making sure the folks who need food right now have food. You can't, if we're only focused on the end goal, the folks who are hungry right now won't make it to the end with us, right? Then there's justice, and without engaging in advocacy and policy work, you can't enact change. And so food security is about creating change within the, or operating within the system at play. Justice is about creating change within the system, and sovereignty really is about breaking down the system and creating a whole new system that serves a larger group of people. So I'm going to talk a little about community engagement from our perspective. A little bit of background about me. I am a white person, and I am actually the newest person to Frontline Farming. When I was reached out to about this opportunity, we've been working with Alejandro and Zoi and Gabrielle on an ethnography project, and I actually had a conversation with one of our directors about if I was the right person to be speaking about this. And so part of this is about authenticity and about checking oneself and making sure that we're all at the table together, which brings me to the point of this slide, which is that Black, Indigenous, and people of color are often equated to poverty and aren't brought to the table. So they're, within the farming context, Black and Indigenous and people of color are equated to the production side and the food access side, and basically food insecurity. And relegating folks to those areas doesn't elevate all voices to the table. It creates a system where you go in and serve and then come out again, which is very similar to the way universities do research. So oftentimes, community engagement doesn't include the production of theory or academic thought or research at the community level. And so a lot of the way I approach work, as well as Frontline Farming approaches work, is through making sure that we understand the researchers and researched are very often the same person and can contribute equally to the production of academic thought and production of theory and production of solutions and change. And so one thing that I like to think about is that authentic engagement, and really encouraging students to come to the table and participate in Frontline Farming's approach to really understand that when we do research, when we do community engaged practitioner approaches, it's about hearing the voices that are in the community, and you're not extracting from the community. You're really there to learn and elevate and see how your resources and knowledge as an academic bolsters and fits together, and continues moving this forward. And so I know something that I've thought a lot about is this participation part in how do we make sure that students are learning to respect in really full and valuable ways, where it's not just extraction, but it turns around and really reinforces the work and the knowledge and the theories that are already embedded in communities, and really valuing the communities that have offered to share this knowledge. So Project Protect Food Systems is one of the programs that has come out of COVID, where we are a co-founder. Frontline Farming is a co-founder of this collaborative response team that works to support food system workers, and specifically farm workers, as well as other agricultural workers in the Colorado food system. And through this work, we developed a promotora network and are engaging with on-the-ground outreach within agricultural communities. And part of that work is first-person data gathering. And so these community organizers are not just out there supporting agricultural workers, they're also out there gathering data and analyzing the data and coming back to like me as the data activist and the data team and the larger steering committee about like, here's what's going on, and here's what we think about this. And that's super valuable to include in our approaches and our reports and how we even deal with policy work. So that kind of gives us a nice overview. I'm going to hand it off to Gabrielle to continue talking about what that work looks like.
Thank you, Kasey. Hi, everybody. My name is Gabrielle Hyde, and I am a fourth-year anthropology student. I feel so lucky to have been working on the Farmworker Advocacy Project with Zoi, Alejandro, Kasey, and everyone else involved with Project Protect Food Systems and Frontline Farming. To give a little bit of background, my area of the project has been centered on the health of farm workers and what that means in the context of social and economic vulnerabilities that they face. This has included some of the barriers and facilitators to the human right to health and perceptions of health in the context that informs different health-seeking behaviors, as well as COVID's impact on this topic. So I kind of wanted to talk about some of the things that I've learned about the lived experiences of farm workers, as well as some of the things that I've learned while participating in this project with this community partner. So as part of my project, I've had the opportunity to interview a few of the regional organizers in the Promotora network that Kasey mentioned. And so they're like a part of the on-the-ground team that are working in these communities to address these inequities. And I found this like one of the most valuable parts of my research, because they've shared with me a little bit about how they're empowering farm workers by providing tools and knowledge to advocate for themselves. So as you might know or might not know, a large part of the agricultural workforce is made up of immigrants, and many of the people that I've spoken with have shared that the anti-immigrant climate that exists across our nation is often more prominent in the rural areas, which is of course where farm workers live and work. So what this means is that this can inflict everyday encounters with discrimination and a sense of isolation for farm workers. And such dehumanizing attitudes have been perpetuated in the living and working conditions that farm workers experience, and the practices of employers that treat them as disposable. So I think in our society, it's important to recognize that there are certain populations that are, I guess, invisible and are excluded from many of the protections and resources that we take for granted. And I think that farm workers are one of these populations that a lot of people don't think of, but we depend on them like for all of our food. And yeah, as a society, we have failed to protect their human rights and to honor their dignity as human beings. These are the hands that feed us, and the reality is that farm workers are always essential, because without them, our food systems would cease to function. So while, as Kasey mentioned, while Project Protect does a lot of work to provide resources at the community level with services, like connecting people with services, providing food boxes and PPE during COVID, a huge part of what they do is advocating for sustainable progress at the policy level as well. For me, participating in this project has been really enlightening. And I wanted to talk about a few of the things that have really stood out to me. So I've been able to sit in on some of the monthly meetings and have really seen people from the farm worker communities are brought to the table where the decisions are being made, and are able to voice the needs that they've identified within their own communities. And I think that is so important for making our efforts like effective and working towards change. I've also seen firsthand how powerful it is when there's a group of people that get behind a cause and are advocating collectively for it. Each person at Project Protect has demonstrated so much passion for what they do and what they bring to the table. And it really is a collaborative effort. And I think has demonstrated for us how to effectively work towards social change. So to wrap it up, I kind of want to encourage you all to start conversations with the people in your social circles and in your family, because like I mentioned, I think this is an area of social justice that a lot of people don't think about. So read, watch, listen, because I think it's really valuable to get a sense of the lived experiences of the people who feed our nation. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Zoi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Zoi. I am in my third year of my undergraduate degree for anthropology and also my first year of my master's degree in international studies and global health. I am going to sound very repetitive, but there is seriously not enough gratitude to express my appreciation for this team and Grand Challenges and all of the people that are here right now. So thank you guys for coming. Thank you for listening. That's the first step in any sort of advocacy. So my part of the research, as you can tell, Gabrielle and I kind of have different sides. I lean towards studying the racialization, which is the process that occurs when a group of people is reduced to a set of occupational practices or beliefs or narratives that later shape and define their identity. And so it's really a form of racism, but it's also studying the reproduction of racism and under what conditions are people discriminated against. And so I'm researching that, and I lean a little bit more towards looking at the policy implications of that, specifically focusing on the H-2A visa program that brings most of our temporary and migratory work from our southern border. And so really examining the historical overview. As Kasey mentioned, the agricultural system has been built on the backs of many, many, many people, and many that have lost their lives and continue to do so. And so growing up, I was seeing this kind of happen through a book or a movie or whatever. And I'm like, but we're eating all of this food and we're holding all of this fruit. And then I would hold fruit and then I would cry. And I was like, well, there's so many people that are dying for this. And so that was kind of the spark that I think you'll see in everybody that works in this center of advocacy, is this need to like give appreciation and really give gratitude for the work that is being put in to feed us. It is such an emotional process, I think. And so I focus on this section of advocacy just because I think policy and looking at how things happen legislatively is really indicative of national interests. And the US and our Southern counterpart have had a very complex relationship that has started all the way back to World War I, that has just been consistently built upon every single year that we continue this program. And something that I've been learning through looking at these laws and things like this is that people are not considered people, from the very legislator, from every single document that they are brought to this country to do work for us. It is in no legal form that they should be treated as human and have humane working conditions. And so that is what I focus on. And in doing interviews with, I have some amazing people that I've interviewed with Project Protect. And what I've really realized is that it takes a village to start a movement, and there are people from every single sector in that I could even think about coming together to work on this one issue. And what I really am thinking about more so is that when you're starting a revolution, when you're starting a human rights advocacy group, like, it's tapping into the power that is already existing. It's not taking power from the top. It's not taking power from anywhere, but it's like tapping into this existing power that, when Gabrielle is talking about the Promotora network, it is tapping into community leaders that were already leading in the first place. They just didn't have a title, or they didn't have compensation. And it's really giving people that are already fighting for this sovereignty the ability to do so, and the ability to do so without getting burnt out. And that's also something that I've been realizing, is that advocacy is like a very exhausting process. And I'm sure Kasey can speak to that way more than I can, but really being there to support advocates is just as important as fueling the movement, because it like all is one big synergetic like organism that is like working all at once. And I love the logo for the Promotora network is like a living, breathing organism that is like all of these different connections. And that's what I would encourage to take away from this, is that a movement is so many working pieces, and it's gears that are moving all together that, yes, rely on individuals, but are nothing without a collective. And I think that's what I've learned from my interviews most prevalently. And it's really amazing given that opportunity. And without taking too much time, I will hand it off to Alejandro.
Thank you, Zoi. And I will share my screen as well. Let's see if I can do this correctly. Am I doing it right? I don't think so. Okay, let's just do it this way. Let's see. Slideshow. There you go, perfect. All right, well, first of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting us. And I also want to thank Zoi and Gabrielle for being those students who are willing to take on more than the minimum expected, who are willing to challenge themselves and to grow beyond their zones of comfort. And I also want to thank Kasey for all the really wonderful work that she does. So I am from Guatemala, and I am now old enough, I am 45 now, old enough to see a lot of work for myself to do in the future, but also old enough to see, to look back and realize what I have done and what I haven't. And I can tell you that I have been part of many efforts, collective efforts that have failed, many efforts that have led to building coalitions that have achieved something and then have crumbled. I have seen interesting ideas never make it anywhere. And I have seen interesting ideas making it into policy. And what I strongly believe is in what I learned back there in Guatemala from the philosophy and practice of Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator, but really more recently in the past 15 years from Bell Hooks, whom I think took those ideas and her own experience and to a whole different level. And I, following her, I think that we need to build community, right? Recognize each other, recognize that we do not come from the same experiences, and acknowledge that there's something valuable that we may bring, and that there's something valuable that someone else brings. Something that I have been repeating myself, my family, and students, and people I work with recently is we need to every day wake up and decide, today I choose hope. Today is a day where we can feel more hopeful perhaps than yesterday or a year ago in the US for sure. But there's so much work to do. There's so much work to do, and there will be achievements and setbacks. And the only way to help things get better is through bringing your hope to a community effort. Put yourself out there with the activist, with the intellectual, with the religious leader, with the workers, with the intellectuals, and just join forces. It is a long walk. If things look good, they can still better. They need to get better. If things look bad, they could always get worse. So it doesn't matter. There's always the choice of hope and community to keep moving forward. Uh, Let me just share with you a really quick story. Um, this is Venancia Dionisio. She is a Tzutujil woman that I worked with in rural Guatemala in 2005, 2006, those years. Uh, she she never went to school. I mean, I think when she was 40, she started to get her primary education, but she was such a strong community leader, and she has so much wisdom that when I met her and she met me, we connected. Uh, at that time, I had this background in within the context of the civil war in my country, of human rights activism and that kind of thing. But when I started working in these rural communities, she and I clicked. And it was really interesting to see how our very different backgrounds and experiences put together helped achieve little things. For instance, there was this one girl who was almost dying of undernutrition, and there was nothing medically that could be done. And Venancia had the wisdom to realize that there was something going on in the family and social dynamics that led her to think that there was some type of witchcraft going on. We pursued that idea, and sure enough, there was something going on there about social conflict, more bigger stuff that I don't have enough time to tell you about. But all that social conflict was affecting this girl and her mom in a way that was having an impact on her nutrition status. Through that, we were able to help that family, and even get to the point of trying to help heal some of the social conflict that was affecting them. But then just briefly, taking this further, and with other people like Venancia and like myself, we tried to enact some policy change in Guatemala through basically suing the Guatemalan state for the violation of the human right to nutrition for children in rural Guatemala. And long story short, 4 families with undernourished kids, with the support of this coalition called Guatemala Sin Hambre at the time, were able to defeat in the courts the Guatemalan state. So that was a huge victory. But then the sad thing is, 3 years later, one of those 5 girls died of undernutrition. So when I say we need to keep fighting, we need to keep joining together, join forces, I really mean it. There are setbacks, there are achievements, but following bell hooks, what I believe in is that there's a need. If we are ever going to be able to uh, change the social structures and bigger social processes that marginalize people, we will need to build coalitions that bring together people from different genders, different social classes, different race and ethnicities, different national backgrounds, because only together we will be able to enact change. So I leave it there. I probably took more than 5 minutes, as usually is the case. Okay, stop share.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers, Alejandro, Zoi, Gabrielle, and Kasey. What wonderful presentations. We do have time to take a few questions before we move into breakout groups. If you have a question, please post it in the chat, and then I can read those out for our presenters. All right, we have a question from the group. How would you encourage, I think this is for Gabrielle and Zoi, how would you encourage other students to get involved with projects like this that they're passionate about?
I guess, I think I don't know, I don't want to call it advice because I don't think I've quite figured it out because there's still plenty of things I'm passionate about that I'm not doing things. I think the way that I am fueled by doing these projects is when I feel like I am tangibly making a difference. So finding either professors or community partners that are willing to give you a lot of autonomy and kind of make your own sort of avenue, I think is how I get activated with that. And how would I encourage other students to get involved? I would say just asking. I think I just asked Alejandro, I was like, hey, do you have anything I would like? And he was like, oh my God, this is awesome. And then introduced me to Kasey and then introduced me to all of these people. And then it kind of snowballs into now I know all of these incredible people that inspire me to do this work. So I think it starts with one person that you say, hey, I really want to do this work with, and it kind of spirals, but it spirals in the best way. But Gabrielle, I don't know if you have something to add.
I think you're pretty spot on. I think for me, just really talking, I think your professors are a great resource for that, and just talking to them and seeing what kinds of projects they're doing and seeing if you can help with those or get involved, or if they've heard of any other projects from other faculty members that might be interesting to you. So yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Wonderful.
If I may add something.
Yes, Alejandro.
So in addition, there's so many problems in this world, in your neighborhood, at DU, at your church, or wherever you go. There's so many problems that it should be pretty easy to find people who are trying to do something about them. So join an organization, go to a meeting, go to a protest and talk to people. That kind of thing, I think, also helps. There's so much stuff going on that you just need to put yourself out there, and you don't have to know it all. You just have to have the right heart and just put yourself out there and connect to people. And then there's so much that needs to be done that that people will welcome you.
Thank you so much for that response. We have one more question and then we'll transfer over to April Alexander from the Faculty of Color Association. For those who are affiliated with large institutions like universities, how do you balance building trust, relationships, and accountability on the micro level with the knowledge that you have limited institutional influence on macro level decisions and policies?
That's a really great question. And maybe Kasey can speak a little bit more to this, but I can speak to the university part of it. I think like when I started all of the projects that I've ever worked on, I've been like, I'm going to change the world. It's going to be different after I do this one thing, which is obviously not true in a certain perspective. But I think the way that I balance kind of this inequity between like really wanting to do really massive work and being able to do X amount of work is changing my definition of like what I mean by world. And so maybe I'm not going to change the world as in all the billions of people on the planet, but I know I'm going to probably change one life, maybe, or maybe two, or maybe three. And I think just being okay with single digits versus billions is how I balance that. And also just coming to the table being really authentic, I think, is how you balance relationships and building trust and all of those things. And I'm happy to say that Alejandro knows me better than some of my college friends. I'm happy to say that Kasey probably does too. It's just being authentic about yourself and your intentions with anybody that you work with, because you don't know how long those relationships are going to last, and they're really just going to become more meaningful the more time you put into it. So
Yeah, I'd love to respond to that because Zoi, you're like 100% on the nose. Authenticity is really where it's at, because when universities want to go engage with the community, it's that one way approach, that single path approach, where it's like, we're coming into you to engage, and not being authentic about like, you do have resources. When I reached out to Alejandro this past summer about, hey, we're starting a promotora network in Colorado. You've worked with like these kind of models before. Are you interested in participating or helping or engaging? And what does that look like for you? He came back and said, this is what it could look like for me. And we engaged in that conversation. And from there, we developed a partnership through the DU Ethnography Lab, and there have been sharing of resources. Like, as someone who has graduated, I no longer have access to a library, and Frontline Farming is still a very data-informed organization. So without that institutional access to a library, I have limited knowledge to what's currently being published, or limited access. So you do have resources. Even if you can't change something at the institution, use the institutional resources and be authentic about what you can and cannot do. If you come in and say, there's nothing I can offer, I'm here to extract, they're gonna be like, no, I don't want you involved at all. And so I think it's a lot about authenticity and being truthful about what you can and what you can't offer. When we work with Project Protect, we have a lot of partnerships with also CU, the environment, Masters of the Environment at CU. There's a couple law professors that engage, and they're very clear, like, I can do this, I can't do that. As a law professor, I can support the policy in this way, and I can't lobby in this way. And so the clarity there is very valuable for moving the work forward in a collaborative sense.
Can I add a little something? So something that I learned a long time ago is that institutions are part of the problem, but also that many of the solutions have to go through institutions. So part of the framework that I work with, and I have been working for a long time with some colleagues in Guatemala, is how do you bring together institution and community, right? How do institutions and communities can communicate in a way that is productive and that is serving the purposes of social justice? So that's an ongoing conversation and an ongoing, I don't know, aim, goal, but authenticity. So, and this is the last thing that I'll say. When Kasey came to us, what she told us all these more sort of like humanitarian work that they were doing in support of farm workers and people across Colorado, but also the policy goals that they have. And their invitation to us was, we want to reshape the narrative about farm workers. And I thought, well, that's something that I think we can help with, especially if we engage in some collaborative type of work with the farm workers themselves. I don't know how to change policy in Colorado, but I get the sense from the meetings I have been at that some people who are part of this coalition know, and they have been working on that. So joining forces is what I think is helpful. And if each of us brings our little piece with authenticity, I think that there's something there to be gained for everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again for those thoughtful responses and for your talks. That just really wonderful and inspiring. It's my pleasure now to turn it over to Dr. April Alexander, who will help us transition into our breakout conversations.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. DePrince, Kara, and Katie for having me here today. And thank you to our panelists for just enlightening us on so many different issues. I'm Dr. April Alexander. I'm co-chair of the Faculty of Color Association, also known as FOCA. And a lot of our work centers around cultivating and promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts on campus across teaching, research, and service. And also to hold our institutional accountable for including those DEI efforts throughout campus. I really love this presentation today because as we're talking about grand challenges, the grand challenge theme that really stood out to me that is probably our overarching grand challenge is justice. Whether that is racial justice or anti-racism, to environmental and food justice, to just ultimately thinking about labor exploitation of different communities. And each of these presenters just talked about that in so many different ways of thinking about how are we, this private institution, really contributing to the public good, which is our motto. What I really loved about Zoi and Alejandro's speech is also thinking about community organizers. There's so many people out there currently who have been doing the work and their ancestors have been doing the work for decades and or centuries. So I'm loving how we're thinking about how do we build fruitful partnerships to achieve justice and liberation across these communities. And I also want us to think about how, as a teaching institution, we include our students. And again, Alejandro really highlights the importance of that. When we engage in interdisciplinary work, we have so many different people at the table to provide various types of solutions to our grand challenges and community problems. And I hope that we're able to use our privilege in this kind of institution to help support the labor and the efforts of people in our community and all the things that they've been doing for so long. So I really look forward into in talking about this with each of our presenters and going into our breakout rooms and really thinking about how do we continue to challenge injustices that are happening in our system in so many different ways. So here is our small group conversations, just thinking about our community guidelines.
Thank you so much, Professor Alexander. And so thank you to Nate, our colleague, who will start moving us into breakout rooms. You will have someone in your room or a couple of people that have the letter F in their name. That's because they're there to help facilitate things today. And we just ask that you focus on what helps dialogue move forward, one speaker at a time, share to increase understanding, listen to understand, speak from your own experience, and be aware of space. So thank you, echoing Katie's thanks to all of our speakers today, and please come with us into the breakout rooms. And thank you, Nate, for getting us there.
You're welcome, and I'm opening the rooms now.